Good morning. Good to have you gather together for a few minutes today, and I hope you're doing well. I want to mention, if you didn't hear yesterday morning's morning moments, I mentioned a petition written up by three very, very high-ranking epidemiologists about our COVID situation. They ended up with thousands of doctors signing their petition and hundreds of thousands of citizens. And these doctors basically said that the sheltering in, the social distancing, the masks, all of that are doing more harm to our society than they are good. And I'm going to make reference to that again. If you want to look it up, if you Google thousands of doctors sign a petition, it comes up because I had lost my link and I found it again in another one. In fact, the three doctors who met together from three of the highest, most well-spoken of universities in the world, their video is on one of the links and just shows the three of them talking. And it's so funny because in the news, we've seen everybody's in separate rooms and no one's near each other. These three epidemiologists, people that their expertise is infectious diseases and breathing and respiratory diseases. And they're all three sitting real close, no mask, talking about this situation and how wrong we have handled it. And it's a great interview. It's about 30 minutes long, but I watched a few minutes of it. But they didn't say anything that common sense has not taught us. I know people that have been diagnosed positive with COVID-19 and in all ages and health conditions, and some with terrible health. And they were sick and they got better. And that's where we are. People get sick. Two doctors that I read their reports where I get my vitamins and supplements. These are both MDs, and they both say the best thing you can do is what you do every year this time of year. When the flu season comes, you wash your hands, don't touch your face, cover your mouth when you cough, take good vitamins, and stay off sugar, and get in some sun, get some exercise. No one has ever recommended you not going out of your house and staying inside your home and not getting around people. The effect of this is just traumatic. The effect on children with schools, these tens of thousands of doctors that signed this petition, they said schools need to open immediately, businesses need to open immediately, sporting events need to open immediately, that those things are an integral part of our society and our culture. For the emotional, psychological, and spiritual health of the individual, we need to worry about the inside of the guy. And it's funny, the Bible talks so much about that. Jesus made fun of the people. You may clean the outside, but the inside's full of dead men's bones. And we are destroying the insides of people in hopes of saving the outside. I heard about a group of people in a rest home, a whole bunch of them. They wheeled outside their rest home in their wheelchairs, and they said, we'd rather die than sit in here in prison. And I don't know if that's what someone told me. I'm sure it's true. But look, relax, enjoy your day, enjoy people. I'm a grandpa. I don't know how long I'm going to live. I don't think I'm checking out this year, but I could. And but you know what? I've only got so much time with my children, my grandchildren. I've got one son, our youngest, Josiah, is getting married in January. And I think what a privilege to raise children. And in this case, in God's mercy, all four of my kids so far like me and my wife, and we've got a good relationship with them. And that's such a blessing. And grandkids, the sweetest thing. Why would I not want to be around my children and grandchildren? It's just, when our daughter was moving from Texas back to the Indiana area, we flew over to Texas and just hung out with them. We were supposed to be helping them pack and stuff, but we spent more time playing games and goofing off and going out to restaurants than we did anything. But, look, this life is so short, and we're going to go to heaven. And I'll tell you, and I don't even feel bad telling you, we're all going to die. And if you're saved, you're going to die and go to heaven. Let's make these months count. If we've got 3 weeks left or 3 years left, let's live them for God. This week, one of our men went home from the hospital, basically on hospice, and they're not going to do any more treatment. And and it's a sad loss for his family. And and God could heal him, but a loss for his family. But think about him, a man who got saved young and has lived for God. And think about him living his life and raising his children for God. And he's going to step out of this world and step onto celestial shores and breathing air and walking with the saints of old and knowing God and seeing all the wonders. Look, that's an exciting day. And obviously there's an emptiness down here on earth when we lose someone that we love. But let's don't lose sight of the eternal. And that's what you get saved for. Well, I wanted to read you a story about a song here, very familiar to most of you, Leaning on the Everlasting Arms. What a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arms. And but as so many of the hymns, this hymn was brought about through some grief. One day, a successful author and businessman, a devout layman in a church, wasn't a pastor, just a good working man, he received a sorrowful letter from two different friends telling of their recent bereavements. In sending to these two friends messages of comfort, Mr. Showalter included in the letter Deuteronomy 33:27. The eternal God is thy refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. And he included that passage into the letters. And as he finished the letters and looked back at it, he thought, that'd be a good hymn. And here we are. He was born in 1839, died in 1929. And Elisha Hoffman. And Elisha Hoffman comes into the story in a little bit. Anthony Showalter is the one whose friends had the grief. He saw the verse and he scribbled a few notes. Then he went to Elisha Hoffman, his friend, who had written, and pastor, who had written several hymns, many hymns in fact. And so the idea from a dear Christian who lost a loved one, two letters, to a friend who sent them scripture, the eternal God is thy refuge, and underneath of the everlasting arms, he brings his thoughts to his pastor, and the two of them get together and they put the song together. And of course that song has been published everywhere. Oh, how sweet to walk in the pilgrim way, leaning on the everlasting arms. Oh, how bright the path grows from day to day, leaning on the everlasting arms. Ready for the COVID scary people? What have I to dread? What have I to fear? Leaning on the everlasting arms. I have blessed peace with my Lord so near, leaning on the everlasting arms. And so two people who lost loved ones, sending notes to a friend who sent scriptures back to them, who realized this could be a hymn, goes to his pastor who'd written some. They get their heads together. They write a hymn. What have I to dread? What have I to fear? And I know, I've feared, you have. There's an accident. Something goes wrong with health, a doctor's report, whatever, and we worry. We're in this old flesh. But when we yield to the Spirit of God and yield our life to Him, we find peace. And that's so important. I want to talk this morning a minute or two about the word consecrate or consecration or consecrated or consecrating. And to consecrate something is to set something aside. And this desk is consecrated to the work of God. We don't serve any beer on this desk, and we don't print secular literature on this desk, and it's just a piece of wood. But for now, while it's in my office, it's set aside for things for God, and that's a simple definition of the word consecrate. But I want you to notice, if you have a Bible, look at Exodus chapter 13. Exodus chapter 13, and there's several verses we're going to look at here. Verse 12, it says, "Thou shalt set apart unto the Lord all that open the matrix, every firstling that cometh of the beasts which thou hast, the male shall be the Lord's." And so the word consecrate means something set apart. So there's a lot of ritual things in the Old Testament. And one thing was the firstborn, and in this case, the firstborn male is set apart for God. It would be maybe given to the priests. It may have been given to the work of God in the temple, or it could be killed. And there's a ceremony that would go involved in the meat being consecrated for the Lord. But it means this is not mine. It's been set apart for whatever the purpose is. And consecrate, we typically count as a religious term, but it could mean other things as well. Now, if you go over to Exodus 22:29, we'll look at another verse or two on this. Exodus 22, and down at verse 29. And he says, "Thou shalt not delay to offer the first of thy ripe fruits and of thy liquors, the firstborn of thy sons shalt thou give to me." And so God says all the firstborn stuff is set aside to me. And in this case, it's things that would be for profit. He talks about the first fruits. You got 100 acres of plum trees, and the first gathering of plums, it all goes to God. And whatever you're making, the word, and I've never looked that word, well, I shouldn't say never have, I probably have, but forgot the word liquor there, and what they mean. I'm not going to go into that because I didn't spend time on it. But the firstborn of thy sons. And now we're talking about your possessions and also your children. And in this case, in the Old Testament, in Exodus, your firstborn son belongs to God. It is consecrated. It's been set aside. Go over to the 2 Chronicles. I want to show you a story here. 2 Chronicles chapter 26. There's a great king named Uzziah. And Uzziah he was blessed. 52 years or something like that. He was the king, and maybe 55 years. That's just off the top of my head. But a great king. And he had done much. He accomplished much. He invented things. He invented weapons and put these like catapult type things and stuff for the walls of their cities. And he was a brilliant man, a great leader. And he filled his life with all these things. Well, there came a time when he got, and we don't know motives, and be very careful you don't start judging motives. When you say things like you knew, you don't know they knew. In fact, you don't even know. The other day, something came up. My wife said, "I didn't know you were doing that." And I said, "I had told you." And she said, "I don't think so." Well, I remember distinctly telling her, "We're going to do this." And she had responded. She heard it. Of course, sometimes we tell people they don't hear. But she responded. She heard it. But it didn't all click. It didn't click that it was that soon. It didn't click what day and when it was going to happen. And though she heard, though she responded, it didn't get in there. You know, sometimes we hear and don't listen. Sometimes we listen and we don't pay attention. And however you want to define the words is up to you. But there are things that we need to be very guarded about. But anyway, in the case of Uzziah, he was a great king and very involved in a lot. But there was a situation that came up in regards to the priest, and he'd been good, he'd done well, but he just thought, we don't want to say we know what they think. Back to the story of my wife and I was sure she heard, but she didn't hear, and so I don't know what Uzziah was thinking, but it appears that he, for whatever reason, he wanted to go into the temple and offer the incense. And he just thought, maybe he thought it'd be a neat thing to be the priest. Maybe he thought, how come they do it? I couldn't do it. I'm the king. I'm the top guy in the land. I don't know what it was. But something got Uzziah to go cross a line to a place he should not be, to do something he should not do. And so we're looking at the story here, and he goes in to offer this incense. If you look at 2 Chronicles 26 and down at verse 18, let's go to verse 16. It says, when he was strong, his heart was lifted up to his destruction, for he transgressed against the Lord his God. So whatever happened, his heart was lifted up, either pride or an arrogance or a confidence, I don't know what. And he went into the temple of the Lord to burn incense upon the altar of incense. And Azariah the priest went in after him, and with him 80 priests of the Lord that were valiant men. And they withstood Uzziah the king, and said to him, it appertaineth not to thee, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord. Now I'll stop for a minute. We have a governor in California and in many other states that has gone into the sanctuary, and he's messing with stuff that's none of his business. And it's none of our political leaders' business. Our founders made it very clear in that First Amendment, freedom of of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the free exercise thereof. The state has no more business coming in telling us how to worship than the state has business telling you anything else. The state's there to protect certain areas of freedom so that humanity, so that the citizens can live freely to do as they choose. The state is to protect freedom, not to take it away. Well, Uzziah, he just thought he'd go into the church and kind of run things a little bit, into the temple. And so his heart was lifted up. He goes into the temple to burn incense. Azariah goes in. 80 priests follow in after him. So here these 81 priests go in there and say, you get out of here. And, our governmental leaders, they're not man enough to come face anybody eyeball to eyeball. They're letting the rioters burn the buildings and businesses and the cars, but let a protester or a rioter come near their home, they panic. They're not willing to face up to this, and they're not only cowardly, they're wicked. And across America, these governors, these mayors that are stopping churches and that are letting rioting go on, those men will face God one day. And it's not our job to go beat them, although I wouldn't do it, okay? I'll just say that. If you did it, then that's between you and God. But I don't think that's how I think God gave us a great free country. We can vote, and there may be a day of civil disobedience in our future, but right now, make sure we get to the ballot box and vote. And even if you fill out that mail-in ballot, don't mail it in. Personally deliver it to a voting place. And if you can't, there's a way you can have someone else do it for you, and make sure it gets in. I'd vote if you could vote on the day of the election, and let's make a difference. The people who said you can't go to church need to all be voted out of office. And there's some things we need to make clear, and we need to get control of that. So Uzziah, let's read the end of the story. In verse 18, I'm in 2 Chronicles 26. They withstood Uzziah the king and said to him, it appertaineth not to thee, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord, but to the priests, the sons of Aaron, that are, and here's the word, that are consecrated to burn incense. We have been consecrated. We've been set aside. Thou hast trespassed, neither shall it be for thy honor from the Lord God. Then Uzziah, he was wroth. Well, he said, I'm gonna, like our leaders, I'm going to make a rule you can't play any wind instruments. Just this last week, Governor Newsom said, all right, if you're going to gather, you can't play any trumpets or clarinets, any wind instruments, because you're blowing the virus all over and everything. He needs to just shut up and get out of our lives. I don't know if anybody listens to that idiot anymore. I mean, that dear man who's our governor, who is lacking in wisdom. Then Uzziah was wroth. Boy, you get in political leadership and you get angry. You feel like you run the world. And I wouldn't want to get in that spot. And by the way, I think we got a great president and a lot of great governors and a lot of great mayors who don't feel that way. But there are some who do. Uzziah was wroth. I'm in verse 19. He had a censer in his hand to burn incense. And while he was wroth with the priests, the leprosy rose up on his forehead before the priests. As they're watching him, his head began to turn leprous, and then the leprosy began to cover him. And Azariah, in verse 20, the chief priest and all the priests looked upon him, and behold, he was leprous in his forehead, and they thrust him out from thence. Yea, himself hasted to go out, because the Lord had smitten him. And Uzziah was the king, was a leper unto the day of his death, and dwelt in the several house, being a leper. Now, he got what God wanted him to get. But if you go back to the middle of verse 18, it said that the burning of incense was for the priests, the sons of Aaron, that are consecrated to burn incense. Now this thing, consecration. Consecration means I'm giving you this job, and you are consecrated to do this job. This object, it is consecrated to the Lord's work. This money, I have consecrated this money to God. I'm going to put it in the offering plate. To consecrate means to set something, to take it away from the world's use usually to take it away from my own use and to give it to God's use. I have for many years. I don't even know how many years. But I set aside Sundays for God. Sunday morning, Sunday night, they were God's. I have set aside most every Saturday, at least some of Saturday, for God, for the going out of soul winning and for getting the gospel out. To consecrate something is to give it to this person and to say, this is yours. Now, I want to ask, what have you consecrated to God? Is your life God's? Or do you just pick a little piece and say, well, God, I'll let you have a little bit here, but my life's not yours. But I'll give you Sunday morning. How would that be? I'll give you from 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock on Sunday morning. But the other 167 hours, God, they're mine. You see, God bought you. And we won't get into it in the New Testament, but you're bought with a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body and your spirit, which are God's. I'm not my own. He bought me. He paid for me. With his own blood, Christ died. He purchased me. When I got saved, I became his. He redeemed me from the curse of sin. I'm not my own. You know, our whole life ought to be consecrated. Where you go ought to be set aside to God, that it would glorify him. Paul wrote in Corinthians, whatsoever you do, whether therefore you eat or drink or whatsoever you do, do all to the glory of God. That's consecration. Consecration is my house. You're not bringing pornography into my house. You're not bringing liquor into my house. You're not bringing whatever ungodly things into my house. We're not worshiping Buddha in my house. We're not smoking pot in my house. My house has been consecrated, set apart to God. And what you do in your house is totally up to you. I believe in freedom. And if the guy down the street wants to open up a brewery, if the government lets him do it, then do it. I'm that strong on freedom. You want to open up a horse track down the way? You and I moved here. There were 2 or 3 horse tracks in Murrieta where they trained thoroughbreds and ran them. Now they're all housing tracks. But you want to open a horse track? That's your business. I believe in freedom. I am big on freedom. But I have consecrated my possessions to God. And if I had a vineyard, it would have to be consecrated that those grapes would be sold for eating. I could, or juice. I could not sell grapes to become liquor. I couldn't do it. I just wouldn't do it. There's some things that I have given to God, and my possessions belong to him. And, would I like something here, something nice here or there? Sure, a lot of things we'd like, but there are some things God would like. And there's some things God deserves. And when we talk about consecration, that we set this thing apart, these hands I've given to God. I don't want my hands to touch anything unholy. I don't want to, people will mock that a little bit. You can mock it all you want, but I'm God's. And I've surrendered my life to him. Once in a while we'll watch some TV and there'll be some exciting scene and the rock music will be blaring. I hit the mute button. These ears belong to God. I don't want rock music blaring in my head. That's me. I've set my ears apart to God. And you do what you want. But we start thinking of consecration. One thing is, who has the right to give it, and to whom do you give it? Do you give it to somebody who's worthy? You give something to your spouse or to your children. For years and years, I've saved this for my daughter when she got married or whatever. Those kind of things have been consecrated and set aside for this purpose. And there's 2 people involved, who's given it and who's receiving it. And I want to encourage you, God is worthy of anything you give him. You want to set aside the tithe? I can't remember not tithing. I don't remember when I started tithing. I just know that many years ago, the principle of giving the first tenth was made clear to me. And you may not do that. It's between you and God. And you may not do. I know people argue and fight about it. They argue, it's not right to tithe. Well, then don't. God wouldn't get mad if I gave him money, would he? And I don't get that. I don't get people that are trying to get us to do less for God. But whatever, I think we can do completely New Testament. Go like Barnabas and others and give everything. Give it all to God. But of course, we've got a life. We need homes and jobs and cars and food and all those things. And I think God's blessed us in America so much. We ought to give him everything we can. But my first fruits financially, my tithes always been to God ever since I can remember it. And my Sundays are God's. My Wednesday nights are God's. I worked Wednesday nights in college for a long time, and I was getting where I didn't have much time left in college. I mean, I went to school days, work nights. You gotta somehow, something's got to give, and I know some of you, we've got military people, and it's your job. You're going to be out of church some. I wish you weren't, but you are. But there came a point when I realized I've only got whatever it was, 6-8 months or whatever it was left. I've not hardly heard my pastor do a Wednesday night Bible study. So I called my boss. I said, I just want you to know I can't work Wednesdays anymore. And he said, we all work Wednesdays. And I explained, and he knew I was trained to be a preacher. And I explained the situation. And I said, I can't do this. I've worked all through college. I've never even seen how to run a Wednesday night Bible study. I said, I'm not going to do it. I'll go find another job. I understand if that's what you have to hold your line on your employees. But I knew he liked me, and I knew I was one of the better paid employees. I made money for the company, and I wasn't unkind. I didn't demand anything. I just said, I can't work Wednesdays anymore. I can go get another job. And he said, no. And he said, could you work till 6? And so I'd start at whatever, 12 or 1 and work till 6. I worked a shorter day. And I said, I'd be delighted. I could work till 6, get to church by 7. And we made the compromise there. But my Wednesday nights, I gave them to God. And my children, when they were born, I gave these kids to God. Now, as they grew up, they had to decide if they would give their own life to God. But when my children were little, from the time they were tiny, just newborns, I told the Lord and I told the kids, this child's not mine. As arrows are in the hands of a mighty hand, so are the children of the youth. And those children belong to God. And since they belong to God, I sought to train them according to the scriptures. I didn't raise my kids as I felt. I raised them as God said, because God gives very clear directions about child rearing. And so since I gave them to God, then I needed to raise them like God wants his kids raised. And I hope you think about what belongs to God. The word consecrate, to set some things apart, and however you want to do it in your life. But let's don't hug everything so tightly that it's all us and it's all ours. My wife and I, last night praying together before bed, it was, God, we just want to please you, and we'd like you to use us and give us strength so we can be used. And we prayed, you've been so good to us all these 38 years, but God, we've got tomorrow and we've got the next day, and we would love if you would help us. We'd love our lives to be offered to you, to do something for you. And I want to please God. I mean, I'm going to be in heaven forever thanks to his salvation. I don't want to, it's my life, I'll do what I want with that. That's stupid. It's not my life. I can't keep my breath going. I can't keep my heart beating. And the word consecrate, the consecration. And my life, Lord, is yours to control. This song goes, I give you my heart and my soul. That's consecration. I'll seek your will, never mine. Well, I could sing that, but I can't claim that I've done it. There's plenty of times I've wanted my own way. And I hope today you'll think about this thing of consecrating yourself. Even your trials, a burden, a hardship comes, give it to God. Say, God, how do you want me to handle this? How do I go through this thing? Yeah, I'm giving it to you. It's a trial you've entrusted to me, and I want to live it as you would want me to live it. Now let's live for him. Consecrate your heart, your life, your mind, your money, your assets. Let's make everything belong to God. He's the best. He's the very best. Couldn't give anything to anybody better. I hope you have a great day. And be praying for our weekend, if you would. We've got a lot going on at church. And across America, the churches need prayer. Please pray. Pray for our country, our leaders. Pray for our churches, and that we would be useful to him.